Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Obsessed Live Show. Here with me today from sleety, windy, rainy, cold Tasmania is the amazing Warrior Woman Zoe Buckley. And I've known Zoe for quite a while now, and she's going to share with us today some experiences that she's had through her life, which are quite traumatic. So trigger warning here for you right now. But I'm really pleased that you're here to share a bit of your life's journey with us and what makes you such an amazing kick-ass woman. Thanks for joining me, Zoe.
Oh, you're welcome. Lovely to be here.
I know. It's just I was so pleased when I saw your name come up and went, yay, one of my favourite people in the whole world.
Thank you.
Now, you describe yourself as a warrior woman. So now, for those who've never met Zoe in real life, she's not particularly tall. Some would call her vertically challenged. But her spirit is just absolutely incredible. Why did you choose the word warrior woman?
I think because I've been through so much that I have been through in my lifetime. And I'm still curious and I'm still interested in things.
Well, that's important, I think, because sometimes when we go through a lot of trauma, it's easy to kind of pull in on yourself, isn't it? But that's one of the things that I really love about you is that your insatiable curiosity and your desire to help other people. So I'm just going to walk you through a few of the things that you've shared with me and that I think that our audience will, some may find it confronting, some may not, but you're sharing this in the spirit of you've worked your way through this and you've come out the other side and you've got an incredible business and you help lots of people. So one of the things that you shared with me was that you had a lot of learning struggles as a child. What did that look like and how did that lead you? So two-part question, how did that lead you to do what you do now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I had trauma early on in my life, so I was sexually abused when I was 5. And as anyone who's had any sort of trauma, and it doesn't have to be that massive, it could be just having some sort of accident, parts of the brain actually shut down. So the cortex at the front really shuts down. So you can't learn when you are in that situation. So I think for me what happened was because of that, I actually did, to a certain degree, shut down. I thought I wasn't good enough. I was being bullied a lot at school, and that had its implications too. And my learning, I still learnt, but I learnt very, very slowly. So that's what happened, and I think that's probably what triggered my learning difficulties and the slowness of my learning. And your other question was, what did it look like? Well, what are you in your question? Are you asking what did the trauma look like, or what did the actual learning difficulties look like?
Like both. I think it would. I'd like to know because we're like 5 is so young. Like you haven't really even started school yet, and like the trauma was inflicted by someone you was meant to know and love you. I would assume. At that
family
age.
Friend, yes.
Family friend.
Yep.
So how did that manifest in your learning? Like what were the things that you struggled with to learn?
Okay, so the things I struggled with to learn were spelling and most things to do with English, although I could read and I read quite well. I think forming sentences and punctuation and verbs and adjectives, all that sort of stuff. A lot of that I didn't really understand, and how to write an essay until I was quite a bit older. The other thing was maths. I just didn't have a brain for maths. I could do simplified maths, but particularly when I got to high school, I had struggles. I just couldn't compute it. It just wasn't going in and staying in there. And that's the other thing with my learning issues was that I would try bust my gut and study, and just scrape a pass. So information was not retaining it. So there were, maths and English were two that I've had to work on pretty hard. And as I said, actual reading was pretty good, but the rest of it wasn't so good in English. And the retaining of information was very difficult too. Yeah, so that's basically what it looked like.
So how long was it before you, you were 5, so you probably didn't tell anybody. I know most people.
I did, actually.
Oh, you did at 5?
Yeah,
Wow.
I told my mum and dad, and immediately we left the place and we never went back there. But in those days, you see, we're talking like 50 years ago.
No, get out of town.
Yeah, I know, I don't look like it. Thank you. You didn't have counselling. You didn't have guidance. My parents didn't have guidance on what to do. So although I told them and we never went back there again, that was it. We never talked about it. And I'm not sure even that to this day that my brothers know what happened then. Whilst it was happening, they were running around. It was a pool table. And I was going, help, and they just thought I was being silly. So I don't think they even comprehended what was happening then. So we didn't have help in those days. You just had to suck it up and move on, to be basically honest. But it did affect me, and did affect me, looking back on it, it did affect me in some self-esteem issues, and lots and lots of other ways. Yeah, I didn't start having boyfriends till I was very late on in life, apart from the fact that I had 3 older brothers and, I couldn't see what was so fantastic about boys. They were just boys.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing that happened at high school. I got bullied because everybody thought I was gay.
Oh, because you weren't interested in boys.
Because I wasn't interested in boys. So there was that double whammy thing going on there as well.
Oh, so you were also with 3 brothers and a father. They also impacted your self-esteem, didn't they? Because they just kept referring to you as you're just a girl. So how did that play out for you in terms of all the other trauma that you're carrying?
Well, I did have one brother that didn't do that. There was one brother who used to just emulate whatever Dad said, basically. And I think with my dad, he probably didn't quite know how to relate to girls. So he found it difficult, because if the boys mowed the lawns, I had to. If the boys were digging ditches, I had to. And look, I'm not being prissy about that. As a girl, I shouldn't have to do those things. That's not the case. But I got tired quicker than the boys did, and those sorts of things. And whether you like it or not, there are some things in females that don't match and can't match males, and vice versa. But I think it had a lot. It's not that I felt unsafe. It's that I never felt totally nurtured and really loved. I think I did by my mum, but my dad was just, he was actually a bit of a bully to all of us, to be honest. Yeah.
I wonder if he probably didn't know how to do that, because maybe his parents treated him like that. It's interesting when you look back at the history of trauma and the history of families, when you realise just how little, like the stories that men get told about what they should be and how they should be is so incredibly damaging.
Exactly. And I think for Dad, like, he had an alcoholic father, so that didn't help him either. And I think at the time, looking back on it, I think at the time he was doing the best he possibly could at that time. But I can only take that perspective as an adult now and look back on it, and everything that I've learnt about trauma and about how the brain works, and, relationships, how a man's brain works and a woman's brain works, and how they're different. All those sorts of things have only come as I've got older. But when you're younger and you're in that situation, you sort of think nobody likes me, the world hates me, the kids at school hate me, I can't fit in anywhere, I don't know where I belong. It's tough. And that's probably why I do what I do now, is to show kids that they do belong somewhere, that they can be resilient, they can have courage. And I think looking back also, that I do what I do now. Oh, sorry, I went through what I went through to be able to do what I do now.
Nice.
So that's what I mean by the warrior woman. I'm determined I am not going to be a victim. I could easily have been a victim. You know, with what happened at 5, my dad being a bully, you know, all those other things that have happened to me in my lifetime as far as trauma goes, I could easily have just said, oh, well, to hell with it. You know, I'm not a worthwhile person, bugger it.
But you didn't
But
do that?
I wasn't. No, I was not prepared to become a victim.
I love that. Tell me about how, so you would have struggled for many years with your self-esteem and identity. How did that show up in terms of the types of jobs you did? Because what I want to get to is what you do now. But like, how did you find your way, and we'll tell you all soon what Zoe does, to what you do now? Because like, you work as a panel beater?
Yes.
Like, really? That's like, what?
Yes. Well, I grew up in a family that were into motor cars. My eldest brother was a mechanic. My second eldest brother used to build stuff, and my youngest brother was engineer type thing, and there was me. So, you know, being the youngest, you tend to follow your older siblings. So we had a very close friend who owned his own panel beating, spray painting business. I had no idea what I wanted to do with myself. I knew I could pull cars apart and put them back together because I've helped my brother and my father lots of times to do that. So I thought, oh, well, I'll just do that and see what happens. I even nearly went into an apprenticeship to do that, and then the bug of being creative that was innate in me and singing grabbed me. So then I went off to South Australia and did a course over there in performing arts, and really found out who I was because I was in another state. I didn't know anybody, and I only had me to rely on. I had no one else to fall back on but myself. So you have to, in those situations, you either pull your socks up and get on with it and create the life you want and the purpose that you want, or you scurry back in a hole and you head off back home. So that's what I did. And that's really where I found myself, was being in South Australia on my own.
What a strange place to find yourself in South Australia. Maybe you could do some advertising for them. Come find yourself in South Australia. Or not. So you've left panel beating behind. Now I know where to come and get my car fixed.
No, not now.
You've gone into the creative arts. And then how did you, so for Zoe works with kids with learning challenges, and I think it's really important to know Zoe's story as to why she's so effective and so damn good at what she does with kids with learning difficulties. So where along that journey did you decide that you were going to become a teacher?
That's a really good question. I did performing quite a bit in South Australia. I was doing 5-6 gigs a night, and on TV and radio and blah, blah, blah. And people, you know, a few people knew me when I walked down the street, that sort of stuff. That was never my intention when I first went into it. But I forgot what your question was. I've lost my train of thought.
That's okay. How did you find yourself moving into teaching?
That's right. To supplement my my income, because what happened was I was going to uni and all the rest of it, and gigs and all the rest of it. A friend said, look, I need a singing teacher, and you're it. So can you come and do some singing teaching? And I thought, oh, never done it before. Yeah, all right, I'll give it a go. So I did. And we had the choir and all that sort of stuff. And I found through teaching and through singing, because it's something that's inside you, it's very emotive, it's very personal. And I found quite often with some of my students, they'd walk in the door, we'd sing a couple of notes and they'd burst into tears. And I go, well, what's wrong? And they go, oh, no, I'm here for singing, don't worry about it. And I go, no, bugger singing, what's going on? And through that, I could relate to what they were going through because I'd been there too. So it was a very long process. I've also worked in schools from prep to college and even a couple of university students. So it was a long process to get where I am now. I could do a whole, hours on the education system. I know they do the best they can, but it's, let's not go there.
We've only got half an hour.
I found it really frustrating because I was teaching to the average kid in the class, which is all you can do really when you're a teacher, because you've got 32 little individuals there, You could swim around in those individuals trying to help them all. And I was just really frustrated because I was creative. The schools I worked at, quite a few of the principals said, you're not teaching the curriculum. And I go, well, yeah, I am. I'm just doing it a different way than pen and paper stuff. I'm doing it through games because that's how kids actually learn and retain information. It's not through pen and paper rote learning stuff. It's actually through doing a game and then taking that and putting it in a different situation. So I found I was coming, head banging. There I was. I didn't fit in again. Head banging against the system and people that just didn't get what it was I was trying to do. So I thought, well, okay, I'm going to bite the bullet and I'm going to go out on my own and I'm going to do what innately tells my body, my system, my gut, whatever you want to call it, tells me to do, which is to help those kids that are struggling, to help those kids that have difficulties, to help the kids that have disabilities as well, because I do work with some kids with disabilities. And just let those kids know that they're normal. God, I wish someone had said that to me when I was, 6, 7. You're normal to be thinking and feeling the way you are. You're normal to feel fear. But it's what you do with that fear that then makes or breaks you. That's the way I look at it. I say to the kids that come to me, there are no silly questions. You're not going to look stupid to me. You are, you just be you. And I have kids that walk around the room while we're doing lessons and stuff like that because they are so anxious and upset and stressed, they cannot sit still. So that's where it went to. It was a kind of natural progression somehow. Really? It's sort of, osmosisly happened.
Seems like a real evolution of building on the things that could have broken you, and you've used them as a real strength to then give value and help other people feel more worthwhile. And I think from what I know of you, it makes you like such an accepting and non-judgmental human being.
Yeah, well, I think there needs to be more of that in the world. We're too quick to judge somebody else by our own, what we perceive as being, normal or all right or whatever it might be. It's like bullying issues, there's different types of bullying as we're aware of, but when a child becomes a bully, you don't name the child as a bully, you name the behaviour and then you help them over that, you see. And this is where the system's falling down. Once you name a child as a bully, they're going to believe that, particularly if you're in a position of authority. So they'll act like it because that's what they think you expect. But if you say, I know you're a good innate person and you're not aware that this is what you're doing to somebody else.
It must be really hard for teachers in the current system because now we've got in Australia the national curriculum. We're all on the same page. And now we've got kids coming back from learning at home for the last 2 months after coronavirus. And I just know for my son that he feels quite inadequate because he couldn't keep up with the work at home because it was, out of his, schedule and everything was different. How do we better support teachers to better support our kids?
Wow. Have you got 50 years for me to talk about that one?
Well, I just turned 50. I may not have 50 left.
Oh, wow. That's such a complex.
Oh.
I think there has to be, okay, firstly, I think a parent has to appreciate education and have a value on education. Because if they don't have a value on education, they're not going to be bothered with it. It doesn't matter who teaches it or what it looks like. So I think we need to teach young kids what the value of education is. And then I think as far as supporting the teachers go, try not to be too reactionary with what the teacher might be doing, but look at the ethos behind what they're doing. There's a hell of a lot of teachers out there that work bloody hard at what they do. Bloody hard. And I work bloody hard at, what I did in the schools. And I think the best way we can support teachers is to not have emotional reactions to, well, my child's had this problem since term 1 and now it's term 3, and why didn't you tell me about it before now?
Sounds like a parent, yeah. Yep.
I know, I've been there, and I've had to take a step back and not be confrontational myself and say, well, this is the processes we've gone through to try and get your child up to speed, but perhaps they haven't worked. And I actually throw it back at the parents. What could we do together, do you think? Because it's a two-way partnership, and there's got to be respect there on both sides. And a lot of teachers get very touchy about having parents come in and question what they're doing, which, they've got to get over that too. So
that's a really good point, that it's a partnership, because I think, I guess as a parent, that, I'm legally required to send my child to school and I expect a certain level of education and input, but I also have to support them from home.
Yes, but not only from home, support them and ask them open-ended questions like, oh, why was this not put in place before? Or rather than accusing questions of you're not doing your job, blah, 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 blah. Because I think the perception is that lots of parents don't really understand what teachers do. They know where they want their child to be, better than all the others, 9 times out of 10. But I don't think they really understand how overloaded the curriculum is to start with. I mean, schools have taken on a lot of parenting roles as well. We're teaching at school, they're teaching now driver's ed, for instance. Well, really, that's a parental role. And I'm not saying that parents know everything, and I'm not saying that teachers know everything, but it has to be, as we've already said, a respectful partnership where you're working together for the same goals. And a teacher isn't going to have all the answers. I don't care what qualifications you have, what courses you've done, what your understandings are. One teacher is not going to have all of the answers. There's going to be subjects that teacher is good at and subjects they're not so good at. And that's where team teaching, I think, needs to come into the curriculum, into the schools more, because each person has their own strengths and they can support each other. It needs to be more of a supporting role within the schools, I think.
Yeah, it always is, particularly primary school, where the teacher's doing English, maths, geography, social science, or whatever are the new. I know my son says some of his classes, and I'm like, what's that? What happened to maths and English?
Yes,
I do that as well, but there's so much pressure on them to deliver that well-rounded, so that's a really good observation. Now, if you've got a kid who's got learning difficulties, and I would imagine that they're increasing with the increased numbers of autism and ASD and other disorders that are being diagnosed, is how can a parent, how do we recognise when your kid needs help, and where do we go to get that help? Because like you're saying, the teachers are overwhelmed, and they're not psychologists, they're not counsellors, and
nor are a lot of teachers either.
So
see, that's the thing. We don't only teach the subject, we have to be counsellors, psychologists, police person, you name it. So where do they, really good question, where do they go? What do they look out for? Well, on my website, I actually have a free resource, which is called an excuses worksheet. On this excuses worksheet are some things, the types of things you can look out for your child saying if they're having a learning difficulty. Now, a learning difficulty doesn't only come from having a disability, it can come from trauma. So the brain will shut down. So this worksheet will go through things like, if you ask your child, oh, how are you going at school? And they go, fine. And that's it. Have you got any homework? No. And then you get a message back from the teacher saying, oh, little Johnny hasn't done his homework. Then you immediately need to clue into, something's going on here. The other things to look for are excuses not to go to school. So I've got a headache, and then they're fine. Sleeping disorders, eating disorders, crying, having behavioural tantrums and things like that before they go to school, all those sorts of things. So if people want to go on my website, www.learningboosters.com.au, they'll find under shop, under the little tag shop, a free resource. They can download that, print it off, and then they can just observe their child. So don't go up to your child and go, oh, I know what you're doing this. Just observe. If there are 10 excuses on there, right? So, and the most frequently used excuses. If they have 4 of them, then you've probably got an issue. So where do they go to there? Well, there's a few places they can go. They can come to me and have I give a free half-hour consultation. We can talk about it. And if they don't have money for tutoring, I then give them a few things to go on with, because I don't agree that everything has to have money behind it. The other thing they can do is they can go and talk to the teacher at the school, because let's face it, the teacher should know your child. They spend 6 hours, 7 hours a day, 40 weeks of the year with your child. They should know what they're like at school compared to what they're like at home. So there might be a difference there too to look out for. Your GP. Your GP will take on board everything you've said. And sometimes as a parent, you have to be a bit of a bully and say, well, this is what I want. I want a referral to a good child psychologist, or I want us to get tests for this. Don't wait for the doctor to give you all the suggestions. You are the parent. It is your child. Take the responsibility and decide what it is that you want. If you don't know, then go to your doctor and talk about it. So there's a few things you can do there. You can come and see someone like me. You can go to the school, and let's face it, I'm sorry, but some schools just are no help at all. I'm sorry.
Oh, don't be sorry. You're preaching to the converted here.
Yeah, I know. I guess they do the best they can, but, anyway. So that's the 3 things I would suggest.
Does this apply? So, like, we're in Australia here, but we do have people who watch across the world.
Yeah.
Are these things common regardless of where you come from and what your background is and how much money your parents earn?
Yes, they are very common. It doesn't matter about any of that. Little Johnny might come from lower socioeconomic, and then, James might come from filthy rich parents. The behaviours and the way they affect them as a child are the same. It depends on what's caused the trauma, of course. But socioeconomic doesn't make any difference. Language, culture, whatever, it doesn't make any difference. Kids are the same across the world.
But just to wrap up, the thing that we really want our kids to know is that they're worthwhile, And that they're normal.
Yes, and for them to remember that they're not a victim of the circumstances, they're a product of their decisions.
That's a heavy statement.
I think that's a really significant thing for kids to learn. Of course, you're not going to say it to them like that or teach them about it like that, but as adult, and I think that's how I've lived my life, I will not be a victim of other people's behaviour towards me or circumstances that have happened. But I am a product of what my decisions are.
Beautiful.
I think that's really, significant way to look at things.
I do too. Zoe Buckley, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
You're very welcome. It's been wonderful.
Awesome. So if I've put in a link into the comments with the link to that free worksheet that Zoe mentioned. Zoe Buckley from Learning Boosters, all the way from Tasmania. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Bye.